Matteo Ricci, S.J., was an Italian Jesuit priest and one of the founding figures of the Jesuit China missions. His 1602 map of the world in Chinese characters introduced the findings of European exploration to East Asia. He is considered a servant of God in Roman Catholicism. Ricci arrived at the Portuguese settlement of Macau in 1582, where he began his missionary work in China. He became the first European to enter the Forbidden City of Beijing in 1601 when invited by the Wanli Emperor, who sought his selected services in matters such as court astronomy and calendrical science. He converted several prominent Chinese officials to Catholicism, such as his colleague Zhu Guangqi, who aided in translating Euclid's Elements into Chinese as well as the Confucian classics into Latin for the first time. Early life. Ricci was born October 6, 1552, in Macerata, part of the Papal States, and today a city in the Italian region of Marche. He made his classical studies in his native town and studied law at Rome for 2 years. He entered the Society of Jesus in April 1571 at the Roman College. While there, in addition to philosophy and theology, he also studied mathematics, cosmology, and astronomy under the direction of Father Christopher Clavius. In 1577, he applied for a missionary expedition to the Far East. He sailed from Lisbon, Portugal in March 1578 and arrived in Goa, a Portuguese colony, the following September. Ricci remained there employed in teaching and the ministry until the end of Lent, 1582, when he was summoned to Macau to prepare to enter China. Ricci arrived at Macau in the early part of August. Ricci in China. In August 1582, Ricci arrived at Macau, a Portuguese trading post on the South China Sea. At the time, Christian missionary activity in China was almost completely limited to Macau, where some of the local Chinese people had converted to Christianity and lived in the Portuguese manner. No Christian missionary had attempted seriously to learn the Chinese language until 1579, when Michel Ruggieri was invited from Portuguese India expressly to study Chinese by Alessandro Vallignano, founder of St. Paul Jesuit College, and to prepare for the Jesuits' mission from Macau into mainland China. Once in Macau, Ricci studied Chinese language and customs. It was the beginning of a long project that made him one of the first Western scholars to master Chinese script and classical Chinese. With Ruggieri, he traveled to Guangdong's major cities, Canton and Zhaoqing, seeking to establish a permanent Jesuit mission outside Macau. In 1583, Ricci and Ruggieri settled in Zhaoqing, at the invitation of the governor of Zhaoqing, Zhuang Pan, who had heard of Ricci's skill as a mathematician and cartographer. Ricci stayed in Zhaoqing from 1583 to 1589, when he was expelled by a new viceroy. It was in Zhaoqing, in 1584, that Ricci composed the first European-style map of the world in Chinese, now called the Impossible Black Tulip after its rarity. No prints of the 1584 map survive, but 6 recopied rice paper versions survive from 1602. It is thought that, during the time in Zhaoqing, Ricci and Ruggieri compiled the Portuguese-Chinese dictionary, the first in any European language, for which they developed a system for transcribing Chinese words in the Latin alphabet. The manuscript was misplaced in the Jesuit archives in Rome, rediscovered only in 1934, and published only in 2001. There is now a memorial plaque in Zhaoqing to commemorate Ricci's 6-year stay there, as well as a Ricci Memorial Center in a building dating from the 1860s. Expelled from Zhaoqing in 1589, Ricci obtained permission to relocate to Shaoguan in the north of the province, and re-establish his mission there. Further travels saw Ricci reach Nanjing and Nanchang in 1595. In August 1597, Alessandro Vallignano, his superior, appointed him Major Superior of the mission in China, with the rank and powers of a provincial, a charge that he fulfilled until his death. He moved to Tongzhou in 1598, and first reached the capital Beijing itself on the 7th of September 1598. However, because of a Korean-Japanese war at the time, Ricci could not reach the imperial palace. After waiting for 2 months, he left Beijing, first for Nanjing and then Suzhou in southern Zhili province. During the winter of 1598, Ricci, with the help of his Jesuit colleague Lazzaro Cattaneo, compiled another Chinese-Portuguese dictionary, in which tones in Chinese syllables were indicated in Roman text with diacritical marks. Unlike Ricci's and Ruggieri's earlier Portuguese-Chinese dictionary, this work has not been found. In 1601, Ricci was invited to become an advisor to the imperial court of the Wanlai Emperor, the first Westerner to be invited into the Forbidden City. This honor was in recognition of Ricci's scientific abilities, chiefly his predictions of solar eclipses, which were significant events in the Chinese world. He established the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception in Beijing, the oldest Catholic church in the city. Ricci was given free access to the Forbidden City but never met the reclusive Wanlai Emperor, who, however, granted him patronage with a generous stipend and supported Ricci's completion of the Zhifang Weiji, China's first global atlas. Once established in Beijing, Ricci was able to meet important officials and leading members of the Beijing cultural scene and convert a number of them to Christianity. One conversion, which he called extraordinary, occurred in 1602, when Li Yingxi, a decorated veteran of the Japanese-Korean War and a well-known astrologer and feng shui expert, became a Christian and provided the Jesuits with a wealth of information. Ricci was also the first European to learn about the Kaifeng Jews, being contacted by a member of the community who was visiting Beijing in 1605. Ricci never visited Kaifeng, Henan province, but he sent a junior missionary there in 1608, the first of many such missions. In fact, the elderly chief rabbi of the Jews was ready to cede his power to Ricci, as long as he gave up eating pork. But Ricci never accepted the position. Ricci died on May 11, 1610, in Beijing, aged 57. By the code of the Ming dynasty, foreigners who died in China had to be buried in Macau. Diego de Pantoja made a special plea to the court, requesting a burial plot in Beijing. In the light of Ricci's contributions to China, the Wanlai Emperor granted this request and designated a Buddhist temple for the purpose. In October 1610, Ricci's remains were transferred there. The graves of Ferdinand Verbiest, Johann Adam Schall von Bell, and other missionaries are also there, and it became known as the Xiaolin Cemetery. It is now part of the campus of Beijing Administrative College. Ricci was succeeded as Superior General of the China Mission by Niccolò Longobardo in 1610. Longobardo entrusted another Jesuit, Nicholas Trigo, with expanding and editing, as well as translating into Latin, those of Ricci's papers that were found in his office after his death. This work was first published in 1615 in Augsburg as De Christiana Expedition ab Hudsonass and soon was translated into a number of other European languages. Ricci's approach to Chinese culture. Ricci could speak Chinese as well as read and write classical Chinese, the literary language of scholars and officials. He was known for his appreciation of Chinese culture in general but condemned the prostitution which was widespread in Beijing at the time. During his research, he discovered that, in contrast to the cultures of South Asia, Chinese culture was strongly intertwined with with Confucian values and therefore decided to use existing Chinese concepts to explain Christianity. He did not explain the Catholic faith as entirely foreign and new. Instead, he said that the Chinese culture and people always believed in God and that Christianity is simply the completion of the faith. He borrowed an unusual Chinese term, Lord of Heaven, which is based on the theistic Zhou term, heaven, to use as the Catholic name for God. He supported Chinese traditions by agreeing with the veneration of the dead. Dominican and Franciscan missionaries felt he went too far in accommodation and convinced the Vatican to outlaw Ricci's approach. Like developments in India, the identification of European culture with Christianity led almost to the end of Catholic missions in China. But Christianity continued to grow in Sichuan and some other locations. Ricci became the first to translate some of the Confucian classics into a Western language, Latin, with assistance from the scholar Zhu Guangqi. Ricci also met a Korean emissary to China, Yisu Guang. He taught Yisu Guang the basic tenets of Catholicism and transmitted Western knowledge to him, giving Yisu Guang several books from the West which were incorporated in Jiabong Yusale, which was the first Korean encyclopedia. Ricci's transmission of Western knowledge to Yisu Guang influenced and helped shape the foundation of the Silic movement in Korea. Cause of canonization. The cause of his beatification, originally begun in 1984, was reopened on January 24, 2010, at the Cathedral of the Italian Diocese of Macerata. Tolentino Recanati Singoli Tra. Bishop Claudio Giulio Dori, the Apostolic Administrator of the Diocese of Macerata, formally closed the diocesan phase of the sainthood process on May 10, 2013. The cause moved to the Congregation for the Causes of Saints at the Vatican in 2014. Commemoration. The following places and institutions are named after Matteo Ricci. Matteo Ricci Pacific Studies Reading Room at the National Central Library of Taiwan. Ricci Hall, a dormitory at the University of Hong Kong. Ricci Building, a building at Huayan College, Kowloon in Hong Kong. The Matteo Ricci Study Hall, at the Ateneo de Manila University. Matteo Ricci College, Kowloon in Hong Kong. Matteo Ricci College, at Seattle University. Colegio Mateus Ricci, Macau. Sekolah Katolik Ricci 1 and 2 in Jakarta, Indonesia. Taipei Ricci Institute, Taiwan. Macau Ricci Institute, Macau. Ricci Institute for Chinese Western Cultural History at the University of San Francisco. The Matteo Ricci Seminar at Fordham University. Matteo Ricci Hall, Hall, Ricci Hall Annex, Ra Hall, 2 buildings at Sogang University in Seoul, South Korea. Townhouse Block No. 14 at Fairfield University. In the run-up to the 400th anniversary of Ricci's death, the Vatican Museums hosted a major exhibit dedicated to his life. Additionally, Italian film director Jon Colandricage produced a 60-minute documentary about Ricci, released in 2009, titled Matteo Ricci, a Jesuit in the Dragon's Kingdom, filmed in Italy and China. In Taipei, the Taipei Ricci Institute and the National Central Library of Taiwan opened jointly the Matteo Ricci Pacific Studies Reading Room and the Taipei-based online magazine Erenlai, directed by Jesuit Benoit Vermander, dedicated its June 2010 issue to the commemoration of the 400th anniversary of Ricci's death. The True Meaning of the Lord of Heaven. The True Meaning of the Lord of Heaven is a book written by Ricci, which argues that Confucianism and Christianity are not opposed and in fact remarkably similar in key respects. Ricci used the treatise in his missionary effort to convert Chinese literati nobility, men who were educated in Confucianism and the Chinese classics. There was controversy over whether Ricci and other Jesuits had gone too far and changed Christian beliefs to win converts. Peter Fan argues that true meaning was used by a Jesuit missionary to Vietnam, Alexander de Rhodes, in writing a catechism for Vietnamese Christians. The book was also influential on later Protestant missionaries to China, James Legge and Timothy Richard, and through them John Nevius, John Ross, and William Soothill, all influential in establishing Protestantism in China and Korea. Works: De Christiana Expedition apud Sinas, the journals of Ricci that were completed and translated into Latin by another Jesuit, Nicholas Trigard, soon after Ricci's death. Available in various editions. Trigard, Nicholas S.J. China in the 16th Century, The Journals of Matteo Ricci, 1583–1610. English translation by Lewis J. Gallagher, S.J. On Chinese Government, an excerpt from Chapter 1 of Gallagher's translation. De Christiana Expedition apud Sinas, full Latin text, available on Google Books. A Discourse of the Kingdom of China, taken out of Riccius and Trigortius, containing the country, people, government, religion, rites, sects, characters, studies, arts, acts, and a map of China added, drawn out of one that made with annotations for the understanding thereof in Purchase His Pilgrims, can be found in the Haeclitis Posthumus. The book also appears on Google Books, but only in snippet view. An excerpt from The Art of Printing by Matteo Ricci. Ricci's World Map of 1602. Rare 1602 World Map, the first map in Chinese to show the Americas, on display at Library of Congress, January 12 to April 10, 2010. The Chinese translation of the ancient Greek mathematical treatise Euclid's Elements, published and printed in 1607 by Matteo Ricci and his Chinese colleague Zhu Guangqi.